And we are live with another version of A Book and a Beverage. And we are honored today to have Mr. Sidney Williams, an author of for 4 decades now.
I guess it is. Yeah.
A long
Yeah.
time.
It sounds like a long time when you put it that
Welcome,
way.
you old bastard. That's
My next line.
Thank you, guys. I'm happy to be here. Excited to be here.
Hey, it was 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. And I roll with the old punches,
There comes a point you can't do anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
I always tell people you can either get older or you can stop. Those are your only two choices.
Yeah. And so
The alternative is definitely worse.
Yeah, so I'm definitely working on getting older versus halting the process.
So, Sidney, you write thrillers and horror. Is that correct?
Correct. Kind of eclectic. Little toes in a couple of cauldrons or whatever. It keeps things interesting. And there's usually a little tinge of thriller in my horror and a little touch of the speculative or the otherworldly in my thrillers. So not all totally disparate.
El Montague is here, so all is right in the world. So what was the first book that you had published? And I'm going to have you date yourself and say when.
Okay, if I can remember. It was a book called Azarias, and it was published in 1989. I am a Paperbacks from Hell era author originally. Now, none of my books made it into Paperbacks from Hell, but we had some cool covers in those days. And
what is Paperbacks from Hell?
It is a book by a writer named Grady Hendrix. It's sort of a retrospective on 80s and 90s, and really even further back, but just pop culture horror paperbacks. It's a book, and it's a beautiful color, full color book with many covers. It looks at gothics and paperback originals from that era, which is what I worked in, and looks at specific authors and all. So it's been kind of a nice little cultural phenomena, and it's kind of reawakened some interest in some of my early stuff. So it's been nice.
So books are kind of like
I started back then.
Things just kind of come around again.
Yeah, I guess so. And a lot of guys that were working then are still steaming. So it's fun.
Now, are you or how long have you been a full-time writer?
Well, I've always had been a mixture of things. I was a newspaper reporter and writer. I've always been writing professionally one way or another, but I was a newspaper reporter when I sold my first novel, and I stayed at that a while, and I worked at libraries for a while, and I worked in corporate communications for a while, and that was not conducive to creativity. And I kind of segued into creative writing teaching after that, which has been kind of wonderful. And so I'm a writer teacher mix these days, and do a little editing, a few things, and goes well.
When you worked for
enjoy all of that.
I think we got a bit of a lag. When you worked for a newspaper, did you was it in a big city or a small town?
It was a medium-sized city. We had a circulation of about 40,000. It was in Alexandria, Louisiana, which is right in the center of the state. It was actually a well-respected newspaper in the day. And we were based in Alexandria, which is in Rapides Parish, which is, we have parishes instead of counties in Louisiana. And Rapides is sort of the population center, and there are a lot of parishes without a lot of population, but a lot of small towns and things. And we covered a broad swath of parishes all across central Louisiana. We had a Capitol Bureau in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and one Capitol reporter, and one guy would go down and cover during the legislative term. So we had two guys in Baton Rouge and other things going on. So it was a significant paper at its time, and it was good. It was a good learning ground, and it's exciting a lot of times, and I got to travel quite a bit with it. So it was a good for ideas, because it exposed me to people and everything.
Right.
And really enjoyed it, and hated it too at the same time, as you do with most jobs. But covered the police beat at night, and that was sometimes going out to murder scenes and doing all of that sort of thing. I did that for about 11 years, and I was actually I interviewed James Lee Burke, as a reporter, and told him, I think he had done a little bit of reporting. He said it takes some strong cojones to be a reporter and a novelist at the same time. I said, yeah. But
So
it was
what-
good training ground.
Right. I mean, because you do meet a lot of, writing's about characters, and nowhere do you meet more characters than working for newspapers.
True.
So do you remember any particular characters, and were there any that kind of saw themselves or, a piece of themselves again in your work later on?
I don't know how many people, and I never pull somebody whole cloth from reality.
No.
A lot of cops, a lot of what I know of police procedure and everything was from the police beat, and good and bad, cop behavior, is in some of the early books, and a lot of things I learned. And of course, I had friends that were cops too. And there's things like, I have a novel called Blood Hunter, and the jail settings and everything. There were jailers and things that would take me around and let me see lockups and all that. So I had authentic detail, and just being out on the police beat and going to the different police agencies and all, I learned a lot. So a lot of that. I have a novel called Night Brothers, which is about a vampire in a small Louisiana town.
Nice.
And some of the fire of the town meetings and things like that, drew on real experiences covering town meetings where people were angry about various topics and things like that. And, that factors into the people that are upset about there being vampire killings that nobody's doing anything about. So it was great. I was chased by a crop duster one time, sort of.
That's not a sentence you hear a lot.
No, it was actually a demonstration of some chemical that would make a finer dot pattern for crop dusters, and so they were using it had purple dye in it to spray, like they do a run with the crop duster and spray on paper, and then let the farmers see the dot pattern and see how much finer and how much wider the dispersal would be. And I was taking pictures of all this. And so I'd get on that runway, and actually the guy had a lens that would fit my camera that was a bigger lens than I had. And these are like 1980s lenses. And so I'd get at the end of the runway, and as he would come in and dust, and there would be a bit of a cloud, I would snap the picture. And then as the cloud came toward me, I would run to get out of the way so that I didn't go back to the office sprayed purple.
Or with cancer,
Yeah, or with cancer. Yeah, exactly. So it was a bit of the Cary Grant experience. And did things, you never knew what you were going to do when you walked in the office, on a given day. And that was exciting. You saw terrible things, of course, sad things for people, but you always, we're out observing. I've been through flooded territory, because you can imagine Louisiana can have some floods, and usually you can catch a ride with somebody. And we had a guy that had like an airboat, and he took us out through flooded, where we're like riding that airboat out at a housetop level where the water is up to, roof lines and stuff. And, you see amazing things when you're out. And of course, you see people pulling together happily in situations like that. And so, it's a lot of rewarding moments in that, in that life.
I am contractually obligated to ask you, what is the weirdest, strangest, and or most memorable thing you saw, over that decade plus?
Oh, the absolute strangest is we did Halloween stories one year, and there was actually during the Work Progress Administration, there was a book called Gumbo Yaya that was produced by the Louisiana Writers Project, as part of the WPA and everything. And there's actually a figure called the Mother Hubbard Man that turns up in a chapter. And he was from Louisiana. And he was just a guy in a black cape that would go out and scare people. But, we dug into that, found as much, and there was nothing really left with the local police about it, because it had happened about 1912 or something like that. We did find the original articles on microfilm about the Town Talk's coverage of it. The paper was called the Alexandria Daily Town Talk. It was 200 years old when I worked there. So, it had an old-fashioned name. But we found those original articles. But beyond that, I found a guy that had, we dug up some local ghost stories, and at a small, and it's not a totally, unheard ghost story, but there was a plantation home, and this young man was staying there, and gave him a second floor room or whatever, and he went to sleep, and he woke up and he looked out on the lawn. And he saw this garden party going on, and like all of the, tables put out, just this elaborate spread, but it was in like the moonlight, it was late at night. Well, so the next morning he went down and he asked his host, what's the deal? There was this big party last night. You didn't tell me anything about it. And the guy goes, what? And he goes, well, I looked out, and he described everything he had seen. And the guy goes, well, there was nothing out there last night. We didn't have anybody visiting besides you or anything. Now, it's a very old house, a very old plantation here. That's where they used to do stuff. And so, one of those real true life little ghost stories. And that's probably the absolute weirdest thing I encountered.
That is weird, because there's so much of you that just wants to dismiss that out of hand.
Yeah.
But then when they give you all the detail of it and everything, and it's
it can't be explained. I'm quite a skeptic, but my official position on, say, Bigfoot is that it'd be really cool if he really existed, but he probably doesn't, and all of those things. But once in a while, it's certainly fun to encounter a story like that. I did so many things during that time. I covered. It was actually a boot camp program for troubled youth. And if kids they would finish their GED and they would go through a boot camp like training in the Army or National Guard. One was sponsoring it. And so, we got up on the rappel. I didn't rappel, but we got up on the rappel towers, and, the photographers took pictures of letting them rappel. And we were down at the edge as they were going under the wires through mud and everything. So, saw all of, just all of that kind of thing. I rode a bus one time with some soldiers back when we were having problems in Panama. Some soldiers that had been out at when Noriega was going on down there and everything, and they had been there. They flew them back into Shreveport, Louisiana, and a photographer and I rode the bus with them from Shreveport to Fort Polk, the Army base. And so heard, all of their stories about, being out in the jungle and doing physical training every morning in the jungle, going on patrol. So it gave me just great exposure to many, many, many things. And all of that went into my books. There's one of the PR guys from Fort Polk got me information on a light anti-tank weapon that's used in my book, Blood Hunter,
nice.
About Bigfoot-like creatures in Louisiana. So, contacts you made, as a journalist certainly helped the fiction work and everything.
Right. And it gives it that kind of air of authenticity that is so often missing. If someone wants to write a book about, like a thriller or something, but has never fired a gun or doesn't know anything about them, it's kind of difficult to have that in.
Yeah. Very true.
You have a Wikipedia page. I got to admit, I'm super jealous. Did you make that yourself, or did somebody do that for you?
I did not.
Did you know you had a Wikipedia page?
I do know I have a Wikipedia page. I think there may be some things that are inaccurate, or that have kind of aged out. It may still say I'm in Orlando. I'm not sure. They don't like for you to update your own Wikipedia page. And so, but no, that was created by someone back in the day when I had, a handful of books out. And I think it's been, updated by, a few times over the years. And I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's reasonably accurate as far as at least my early book list and everything.
Yeah. You can say you've made it. You got a Wikipedia.
Yeah, if you're a Wikipedia author.
I am somebody.
Yeah.
So you Mike, I'm just hogging everything here. I've been yammering off for 15 minutes there, Mike.
You're fine. I was busy petting my dog.
We may have my cat come in a minute. We just never know.
Oh, cats come into these things all the time. We always have cats in. So you are traditional, or kind of, you're not indie published. You're traditional, but is it a very kind of light, I guess, traditional? You still have a lot of say in what you do.
I'm kind of, I straddle the line these days. I guess I'm a hybrid nowadays, but I started out with Pinnacle Books back in the day, which is part of a division of Kensington Books, and they had Zebra and a couple other imprints, and I was in the Pinnacle line in the late 80s, and had I wrote a novel and used Writer's Digest and Writer's Market, and found an agent. And
back in the day where you had to have stamps and envelopes and
and there was a
machine that you had to crank copies out of with a piece of carbon paper around the drum.
Well, with Daisy Wheel, I had a Daisy Wheel which would give you a crisper print, but the Daisy Wheel would get old and it would start picking up little flags on the letters, and so you have to change the Daisy Wheel. But we sent paper manuscripts out, and when you were trying to sell a book, it was interesting. There used to be a company called Papyrus Place, and they sold these boxes, and basically there was a slightly smaller box that would fit inside a bigger box, and you put your manuscript in that with your return address on it and everything, and send the big box out with the little box in it and the whole manuscript, and shop things around like that. But I found an agent using Writer's Market, Writer's Digest, and they actually failed to sell my first novel, which was called Azarias. And then I had read, there was a collection of essays about Stephen King, And I read that he sold, actually, I think it was probably Rage, which he has pulled from publication now and not Carry. But he basically sold his first book, or almost sold his first book, by writing to the editor of the Parallax View and whatever the publisher's address was. And so I saw, I was seeing horror books with the Pinnacle logo. And, my publisher, it had gone out to Fawcett, I know. And I know it was Fawcett. There were several, paperback houses of the day, or guys doing original horror in the day. Anyway, I started seeing Pinnacle books, and actually ran across a book called Ghouls by Edward Lee. And Edward and I have never met, and that's a pen name, but we've never met in person. We corresponded back in the day, but anyway, always have felt a little connection to him because that was the gateway. I wrote to the editor of Ghouls, and address, query letter, and I got my query letter back with a note that said, "Please send complete manuscript." And so I did, and it fell on the desk of an editor named Anne Lafargue, who was fairly new at Kensington at that point. And she read it and liked it and conferred with another editor, and then called me up at the newspaper. I was at my desk at the newspaper, and of course, I've had my phone number on there and all. And she called me up at my desk and said, "Hi, we like your book and we want to buy it." And so I was with them for eight books total.
Wow.
I did several adult books, and they sort of kind of wanted to tailor me, and it was for various reasons. They kind of wanted to tailor me into young adult, and so I did some books that sort of segued, and I wound up writing 3 pure young adult novels under the name Michael August for a line that they had called the Scream Line, and it had the Z-Fave logo or imprint on the spine. But and I learned, they had an expert on young adult novels, and so we worked with the experts on the demographic criteria for young adult books and all. And it was fun, very, very fun to do.
So Elmowski's picking up the slack. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What was my favorite book that I've written? It's always tough to say that, and it kind of shifts.
It's your favorite child.
Yeah. But I guess I'll hold this up. My thriller Fool's Run, which is my second to the most recent novel, got really good reviews in Publishers Weekly and things like that. And I'm really happy. I have a series character in this book named Cy Reardon, and Cy just returned in a book called Long Waltz. And so I would say, asking me today, I'll say Fool's Run is my favorite.
And he has follow-up questions. What was the most fun to write, and which one came the easiest to you?
Probably some of the YAs were probably among the most fun to write. And my favorite of my YAs is one called The Gift. And I think that was the third one, and I had really kind of found the flow of those, and it drew a lot on my hometown and my high school experiences. And so, because it was set in a high school, and so that one was, just a lot of fun, and I'm very, very happy with that one. New Year's Evil, very pleased with that one as well from the YA front. The easiest ever was a book called Night Brothers, which I've mentioned earlier, my vampire novel.
Yep.
And I had sold my first book, Azarias, which, we just heard that story. And they were interested in, another book. And so I had a contract for Night Brothers based in those days with the big houses. You could sell a book with 3 chapters and an outline. And so that's what I did with Night Brothers. And the fact that somebody wanted it and was waiting for it, it just was the wind at my back. And that just flowed, flowed very easily. And
So
I'm sort of an intuitive writer. And so it just kind of, everything fell into place.
it's always nice when that happens, even for a little bit, not to mention a whole book.
Yeah.
How is the process? I mean, having worked with publishers back then, when you had to, physically print your pages and mail them in a box, to doing it now, how has that dynamic shifted? Working with publishers, what their expectations are of you, and they're probably not taking 3 chapters in an outline anymore. So
No, but I am fortunate, and I'm my own weird little niche, but I am very fortunate. And what happened was, I had my run at Kensington, and I went into the corporate world where I was not real productive, and I wrote comics during some of that time, and wrote it's when I think I told you before we started the actual live show, I had worked for an Indian company, and I did a graphic novel for an Indian company, and the editors changed there, and that became not a good experience. But I did some of that during my corporate time, and then I went to Goddard College and earned an MFA, and my whole thought was I was gonna I was doing the corporate thing at that point, but I was going to sit back and write literary short stories and just, see what happened on that front. And, I was not producing novels well in the corporate environment. And David Wilson from Crossroad Press called me up, and he said, "We've got this company and we're starting to put people's backlists out." I think they already had Ronald Kelly by then, we're bringing out his books from back in the day, and several other authors, and said, we're interested in your titles. And that was an interesting process. So I actually had to find my second editor at Kensington, the guy who'd been with me through the YA novels, and say, hey, the contracts have expired on these, but do I need to do anything? And actually, the lawyer gave me a release for those titles, and Crossroad brought those out. And in the process of getting those ready, I had a novel I had worked on, and I said, "Look, I've got this book, and we'd love to do something new." And so a book called Midnight Eyes, a serial killer thriller set in Louisiana, they brought that out as an ebook original. And then as time has gone on, I've done more for them. And Fool's Run and everything came out of that process. And just I have to do good books. But it's since we have a relationship, there's not as much of the hurdle of selling each book. We kind of I do my very best to make it good. I used actually an independent editor on Long Waltz just to get a little outside perspective and make sure it was a good book, or at least do the best I could with it. It was actually an editor that had worked for James Patterson, and we've got at least that layer of opinion thrown in. But it's kind of a great world for me, and it's kind of win-win. I mentioned the paperbacks from Hell era, that I was from. Began in that era, and recently they brought out my late 80s or early 90s novel Nelf with the original cover art, in part to call attention to the fact that they have many classic horror novels, in the, under the Crossroad umbrella and available in audiobook and ebook these days. And this was, one of the, beautiful, covers, crazy, cheesy, whatever you want to say, covers from that era. And actually, we had to call my old editor again, and find out who the artist was. get the right. They Crossroad took care of all that, but they got the rights back for the artist, or the rights to publish. And the original book was smaller, so this actually uses more. These bedposts were never there before, and so we actually now have more of the original painting than was ever on the mass market paperback version. So it's been exciting. And a lot of this had gotten hard to get, the used copies, because of paperbacks from hell in general, and it was kind of a coveted title. Their algorithms or whatever, it was selling for like $400 on Amazon or whatever. The original book, the ebook, was $3.99 or whatever. But people wanted, the hard copy. And so it had gotten kind of coveted, and having the new edition out, people are bookstagramming it now, and there are new reviews coming in. So it's been kind of a fun little resurgence. It's said that, Mario Puzo one time said, if I'd known everything that was going to grow out of The Godfather, I would have written a better novel. And this was written, when I was a reporter and when I was younger and everything, and it was kind of in my, maybe I will write sentences like William Faulkner phase. And so, it's kind of like, not that I think it's a good book, but, I think, wow, if I'd known, 20 years later, 30 years later, what it was going to be, I would have done something a little different, maybe.
I think every creative goes through that, though. If you have a woodworker that looks at something they made 20 years previously, they're going to find a lot of imperfections that they never saw 20 years ago, just because they're much better at their craft and what they do.
Yeah. And well, and you live and you grow. And, I can look back on a book and see, where I was and who I was when I was writing it. And, it's, you can't be who you are now when you're starting out. And
Right.
yeah, it's true. I have been encouraged by the fact that if you read much biographical data about somebody like Ray Bradbury, he was always revising. He did the original collection for Arkham House, Dark Carnival, and then he had a little more success with the Martian Chronicles, and Dark Chronicle sort of morphed and was re-edited into the October Country, and he repolished those short stories. And he would it's kind of fun now because you can find so many things online, but he would rewrite stories and do little flourishes slightly different and everything. And, the fact that Ray Bradbury was always rewriting makes me feel like, yeah, we all do this, not to compare myself to Ray Bradbury, but.
So El Montague has a slew of questions for you. Cherry pick whichever ones you'd like. And I have a question for you also after you're done with El Montague.
Okay. Well, I'll do writing friends. I have been fortunate to have many, many, many writing friends over the years, big and small, I guess you'd say. And I can talk about a lot of them, but one of my dearest friends passed away a couple of years ago. It was a guy named Robert Pettit. And we wrote a few short stories together. And we were both from Louisiana, and we found each other through the Small Press Writers and Artists Organization, and began writing snail mail letters. We'd write about a letter a week. And we wound up writing a story together for the collection Under the Fang, edited by Robert McCammon. And that's a collection from the Horror Writers Association. And we were both very active with Horror Writers Association. We traveled together in those days to many, many cons. I used to go to World Fantasy Convention every year, and we went to World Fantasy Convention all over the country. Robert was from East Texas, and so I got to be friends with Joe Lansdale, and Joe Lansdale became an early friend and kind of a supportive, guy, and he's a very funny guy. And so we would hang out with him at cons. Nancy Collins was a Louisiana author, and hung out with Nancy at a lot of cons in those days. And Wayne Allen Salee, who is the author of a novel called The Holy Terror, is a very dear friend of mine. And he wrote stories for many years that were, when Carl Edward Wagner did the year's best horror collection each year from Daw. Wayne had many stories in those collections. I knew Carl back in the day. I knew him a few years before he passed away. He was a very funny guy too, and very funny guy to be on panels with and stuff. And it was he would come down to the New Orleans Science Fiction and Fantasy Festival. We used to have a good time going to that. So those are some of the folks from back when. I knew Charles Grant back in the day. He very kindly told me, "You write neat books" one time, and that was great to hear. And knew his wife at cons very well, and still stay in touch with her on Facebook. And so those are some of the old friends. Dean Anderson, who also sadly has passed away, was a really good friend of mine. Al Going Back has been a friend for many years, and we used to see each other. I think we met first at a con at World Fantasy in Seattle, probably 89 or so, and wound up living in Orlando and being buddies for a while. He had a meetup group, and so we would see each other, and so he was has been a good friend for many years. And then these days I hang out with a lot of folks from the Horror Writers Association Virginia chapter, which is quite active, and Brian Nowak and Brian Grover and Joe Madry, and just many, there we go. Yeah. And many folks in that group are good friends these days. When you start listing people, you wind up leaving people out, right. Sadly. But a guy named Tom Lucas is a very good friend of mine from Orlando, and he and I'll actually be sharing a table at AuthorCon. He has a new book out that is a sort of looks like a YA novel. It's sort of an Encyclopedia Brown meets Cthulhu Mythos novel. It's called Research Randy and the Pie of Despair, and great book. And it is not a YA novel, but it is like, it's told in that style, and is about this old New England town with mysterious goings on in it. And after 26 books or whatever, Research Randy moves to that town. Simone Karate, who is a science fiction critic, is a very dear friend of mine. And Simone has written a couple of books on things like the Generation Starship in science fiction. And so just a tremendous guy. And Lynn Worthen, who I think I may have shown you the guys before we actually started the live broadcast, but Lynn has a press called Camden Park Press, and does great anthologies. And I have a story in this I'm very proud of called Red Moon Over Manhattan, about a werewolf in New York in 1948, and a werewolf that runs afoul of anti-union forces. And so just tons of fun to write. And I actually sold Lynn a story about that was a Florida Man meets Edgar Allan Poe story a few years ago. And we have never met in person, but we have stayed in touch over several years now. Sonora Boston Posner, who writes as Sonora Taylor, is a good friend of mine these days, and she's doing some tremendous work. We actually were in that Poe anthology, and she has done a lot of stuff, and there's so many folks out there, so many good friends.
So I have a question, actually a follow-on. First, how many books have you written?
14, 15, something like that.
And my question for you is, have you had a book that you've written, you're like, you know what, this isn't my best, but it's good enough. I don't know how to make it better. I'm just going to publish. Or do you say, no, I'm not, if I'm not 100% behind this, I just am not going to release it? Have you been in that situation before?
Yeah. Excuse me. And I have, well, I wrote 3 novels sort of learning to do it. So I actually had 3 private eye novels that I wrote starting in college, and those are trunk novels. And after I had written Azarias and Night Brothers, my first 2, I worked on one that was sort of mythological. It had some myth to it, and used the concept of the Sibyl. And I wrote that whole book, and it just didn't come together. And so I've written a couple, and that I just didn't let go out. And I happily am fortunate enough that I can say, this one's not happening. Mm. I think now I have enough of a feel for things that I can, I can pull it together. If it's something's not right, I think I can work on it until I get it right.
Mm.
It's so difficult to make that call, though, because I mean, you look at how many musicians that you've heard of who had a song that they absolutely despised, they didn't want it on the album, it sold 20 million copies.
Yeah, and I used to think maybe that my novel Blood Hunter was not my best, and then when we were re-editing it for the ebook version, I thought, okay, I like this better actually than I thought I did in the day. That's probably the closest to being under contract and finishing something and not being at the time completely happy with it. But in retrospect, it's a nice, I'm happy with it, and it's sort of they're not truly Bigfoot type figures. They are something that has been transformed. And so I'm happy with it, and having reread it, I'm going, okay, I did okay with this. Yeah. I wrote a novella. Sometimes things do surprise me, though. I've had, messages from people that, both with Fool's Run and Long Waltz, that, people have responded really well to Cy Reardon and to the storylines there. They're action, adventure, mystery, and they sort of rope in caper elements, and I try to keep them lively, and people have just really responded to Cy. And Publishers Weekly, it just, almost had to sit down for a minute when that review came my way, because they like Cy, and, and it's a part of you. And right. So when they said people are going to like Cy and look forward to more adventures with him, that just somehow or another, that just struck me, just really, okay, maybe, being tenacious with all this was worthwhile. And ultimately, that's the thing. It's something you're going to leave behind. Speaking of, we were joking about getting older. That's, what it is at the end of the day. If you can have a body of work, you've done something. So that's kind of my take on it.
So Sidney, I'll tell you that my first book, my main character is Grommy, and I took a lot of me into that or whatever. And I've almost universally people like, he is annoying. I absolutely hated him in the beginning. He was all right by the end, and I'm like, thanks. I'll try not to take that personally.
You did it well. Montague has another question, but before we get to that, I want to ask. So you said you've been going to cons pretty regularly. How have they changed over time? I mean, obviously they're a lot bigger now, but yeah.
They they're a lot less fan run these days. There are some, but many are professional deals. And
Yeah.
they used to be a lot more panel oriented. And I mean, back at things, I used to go to one called CoastCon, and long story, but there used to be one called CoastCon that was in Biloxi, Mississippi, and they held it at a civic center there and used the meeting rooms. But the panels would fill up, and before Dragon Con, just going as a fan, there was a con before Dragon Con in Atlanta, and like David Gerald and people like that. They'd have like a panel of 4 or 5 science fiction writers, and those would be packed. And panels are not quite what draw people in anymore, and they're not as panel oriented. They're certainly more celebrity oriented, which is fun because I was at before AuthorCon. They did Scares That Care, and they had that was very celebrity oriented. I was walking down the hall next to Sid Haig one day, and I'm going, Sid and Sid walking down the hall, and just to it is fun to see the celebrities, but they have gotten, so many have gotten to be about getting the celebrity autograph for a couple of bucks or whatever. Again, fun to see. But fun to see folks. But it used to be. I used to love panels and panel discussions, and being on panels with folks and talking, and just talking books. And I miss some of the flavor that used to be there, but there's still. Also, in those days, you relied on somebody else to have. You hope there was a seller that had your books in the book room. Now, you can bring your own, so your own copies.
You think part of that? Well, Mike plays Jingle Bells. You think part of that?
What was it? What was the old Spike Jones, the old sound effects guy?
Do you think part of that
sound effects albums
is because of all the indie space now? I mean, there's so many authors now, right? That they're probably not as individually well known as 20, 30 years ago when you had an author come in. It was someone who was probably traditionally published. They probably had pretty decent name recognition. They were, in fact, a minor celebrity in their own right. And now you have Mike and I, right? So
one thing about it, and especially back in the day, it's still, but when they were fan run, the TV people and the movie people were expensive. And so authors would come for free to be guests. And so, they were mini celebrities. Yeah. And it was that fueled a lot of fan convention, and especially Southern fandom of the day. And there were, and I am still friends with some of the people because there were these great little fan communities at each con. And of course, the New Orleans fan community went over and helped the Mississippi Gulf Coast fan community, and there was cross pollination, and guys like he's passed away now, but George Alec Effinger came out of that culture and things. There was, it was just, because it was fan run, it was just a little different than the commercial companies. Not to, because people go and they have fun. So not to denounce those, but it's just different. And I do miss those days.
A lot of these companies put on a good show now, but I don't want to go as far as say it's soulless, but it's kind of trending that way. It's much more about the corporate kind of the money aspect of it. That's where
a lot of things are happening, and that's how stars get there. There are happily fun things happening around. The commercial guys put out the umbrella, and then happily some fun stuff still happens. So
yeah.
But it's got, and something like I don't want to name any, but some of them are just very very corporate, and That it's the nature of the beast, and it's because Comic-Con became such a thing, and so there, all that has kind of branched out from the original San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah.
So EL here asked about 10 minutes ago. The first part doesn't make any sense anymore because we've gone well past that. But it says, do you ever frighten yourself?
I don't know that I have ever purely frightened myself, but I can get very immersed in particular scenes, and the end of Long Waltz takes place during a hurricane, and some guys have to go out on a boardwalk during the approach of the hurricane, to some of the high winds and the surge and all. And writing that, it was almost like living it, and so I really felt that, and I felt almost exhausted when it was over. I used to write. Well, when I was a newspaper reporter, I worked from 1 in the afternoon until 10 at night, and usually longer than that. And so I would get off work, and I would rest a while, and I would eat something. Had very different patterns with that. You'd eat breakfast at a different time, lunch at a different time. So dinner was about 11 at night, and then I would write from midnight until about 2 in the morning, because then I have to get up early. And that was kind of a perfect time to be writing horror novels, and probably writing late at night, in the dark, with it dark outside and everything. And you're writing about demons menacing small towns and vampires. I would feel the creep of it at times.
Yeah, awesome.
And it's good to get into that place.
Anybody else have a question? Mike, do you have a question?
My brother is trying very hard to reach me.
Put him on.
God, no. He's the one I usually talk about.
We have a caller.
That's right. Our first ever caller to the show. Woohoo!
Oh, no, so it'll be something like, well, when you come, make sure that you bring this with you. So, yeah, nothing interesting.
So, Sidney, what's next for you? I'm going to put up your blogspot, your website thing there.
Okay. And sidisalive.com is a good site to. You got it. Yeah, you got it coming there. Or well, that's the blog spot, but you can get there from there. And sidisalive.com is the website. I am working on a novella called A Disturbance of Shadows, and it actually goes back to Central Louisiana again, and takes place at a plantation home there, where I had a character called Matthew Laird back in the day, or it's always alluded to, and he was a priest who was excommunicated and traveled in Europe and connected with Aleister Crowley. And some people working for a paranormal blog discover that at this old plantation house, he actually came back there and maybe did some workings of his own. And as some bad tornadoes and things tear through the territory, they start to, realize that there are some things left behind there, and also some people that are interested in what he did that are lurking around. And so coming together well, and it will ultimately probably be a Crossroad Press book, but I may do it as a chapter release thing, since it's a brief novel, and try something on that front. And I'm happy with how it's going. So and it actually taps into some things I made notes on years ago, and gets back. It's kind of nostalgic for me to be writing about Central Louisiana again, because I lived there so many years and lived and traveled all of that territory so much. So I'll hopefully be finishing the first draft, hopefully in a few weeks. And so that'll, somewhere down the road, that'll be coming out.
Have you been back that way much recently?
Not in a while. I'm in touch with some people there.
Do you not want to go back because you don't want to find it's changed a whole lot from your memory, and that's kind of what's driving this train now?
I don't know that I worry it's changed a lot, but I've been back to North Louisiana where my wife has family, but I don't have a lot of family there anymore. And there are some sad things. The newspaper office is not, it's owned by Gannett now, and it's shrunk a lot. It's gone to just online. And, I don't think the offices are peopled by as many people as they once were. And so that makes me a little sad. And I just haven't had occasion to go back there of late. But a little bit of sadness too, that things are not what they once were there.
Yeah. Forward, onward.
Yeah, exactly. And I love Williamsburg, and I love Virginia. So, and it's a great jumping off point for travel and things. So
it really is. It's kind of in the middle of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So we talked before we went live. You said you're going to be at AuthorCon coming up. Is that correct?
AuthorCon 3 coming up in April in Williamsburg. And I'll be out there with my friend Tom Lucas and his book, Research Randy. And I will have, all of these I've been holding up, and some other anthologies that I have stories in, and some other novels.
And then RavenCon as well, correct?
Yeah. And I need to mention, I mentioned my friends from Virginia, but a couple of friends put together an anthology called Dark Corners of the Old Dominion, horror stories set in Virginia. And that was a lot of fun to work on. And there will be, copies of that out at AuthorCon, and many of the contributors will be there to sign their stories. So
that's awesome.
Going to be a fun thing, to do at AuthorCon, and see how many Dark Corners of the Old Dominion signatures you can collect.
All right.
Well, I will see you at RavenCon the following weekend.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And
I will
that
see
should be a
nobody
lot of fun.
So, Sidney, is there anything that we didn't ask you that we should have asked you? Because we worked very hard on this research.
Yeah, well, I covered a lot of ground, and I've worked really hard to plug a lot of novels.
Well, that's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I love, when people take a minute to write a review. That fuels so many algorithms and all that. If anybody out there listening finds a book and reads it and likes it and can jot a few words down, that's great. Certainly Bookstagram stuff. And, if you have more books than Nelson, Bookstagram those. And, every little bit helps. And William Faulkner said, "Our right to say no to death." And so, every little bit keeps Sid alive.
There you go. All right, Sid. Well, thank you very much for coming out and hanging out with us here today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. His brother's calling again.
And Mike's happy that he doesn't have to answer his brother's phone call.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Right.
So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
If that's it, we'll do the end stream and we'll wave awkwardly until it finally cuts